Hunting ground. Enter the Warthog. Very early on, I designed the god of the hunt and his entourage. The first member of that entourage the Shipwright encountered was the Warthog, who was actually inspired by a prehistoric entelodon. When designing anything, characters included, the number one goal is to tell the story. The first pass of the Warthog was created in a narrative vacuum. I had just begun to explore this setting and had some vague ideas of what role he might play in the story. Without more information, I leaned harder on making a dramatic visual statement. He was a mountain of a man, like a stone pillar, vainly adorned with cumbersome jewelry. In the first outline, he underestimated the Shipwright and paid the ultimate price. Now, many months later, I have a better handle on the setting, and I have a clearer vision of the kinds of stories that I want to tell. To start, and this is a bit of a spoiler, I don't want to kill this guy off so swiftly. I have some ideas about how I could use a character like this. The original version was meant to look like a once formidable hunter who had overindulged in the fruit of his success. Still dangerous, but slower than he believes. The updated version is more athletic, a hunter in his prime. I've redesigned his gear accordingly. During the exploration stage, I figured out some of the principles behind the way people dress in this antediluvian world. He wears a simple belt and loincloth, with a minimal amount of armor over his chest, trusting more in his own speed and strength. In the first version, I gave him some mammoth tooth knuckles, a fun idea that I'll probably save for later. Now, he wears heavy bronze gauntlets with large tusks. While most people try to create as much distance as possible between themselves and the deadly creatures in this world, he has built a reputation on fighting them up close. The original design included a mask that was a real skull plated in metal. I designed something smaller and simpler that allows for more dynamic movement. It's finished off with long, heavy dreadlocks. They're mainly for dramatic effect, but they do offer some protection as well. To preserve a bit of his original vanity, I decided to give him a themed chest plate. Like many characters I have in mind, this guy understands the importance of branding. I tried out a few simplified warthog faces until I found the one that I liked the most. This guy will be involved in a few action scenes, so I thought it would be worth sketching up a back view as well. It's amazing how many times these come in handy to remind myself of all the details. Without them, I think I'd be all over the place, forgetting details, changing things with each new shot. After working on his design, I went back to look at the original. Whenever I'm redesigning stuff, I always like to keep the previous versions close by. The first take usually misses the mark, but there's often something in it that's worth keeping. Even when you have a clearer picture of what your design ought to be, there's something special about that first gut instinct drawing, something unhindered by the new limitations. When looking back at the original Warthog, I liked the excessive jewelry on his arms, the protruding entelodon cheekbones, and the obnoxious tongue on the mask. Also liked the ribs made from locks of hair. I made sure to pull those back into the final version. Now, this hunter needs his mount. He's going to be riding what many have referred to as a prehistoric warthog, the entelodon. As usual, I start with the skeleton. This helps me to get familiar with its proportions and helps to prevent me from making things up as I go. With a solid skeleton, I can figure out where the anchor points for the muscles are, and this will help when drawing the creature from multiple angles. While this animal won't be a huge feature in this episode, I'd like to make sure to figure it out now so that I can keep things as consistent as possible. A lot of previous artistic representations of these creatures have them as gray or brown, which makes perfect sense. For most animals in this story, unless there's a narrative reason not to, I want to give them striking patterns. I referenced two creatures and blended them together, the springbok and the okapi. I think this gives it a memorable look and makes it feel like it's wearing war paint. With the entelodon figured out, it was time to design some armor. I threw the Shipwright in for scale. As usual, this creature is a bit bigger than the specimens we've found. With a bit in his mouth and a ring through his nose to kick things off, he's got a protective face mask that emphasizes those cheekbones. I was trying to attach a crest to the mask, but it just wasn't clicking. Instead, I gave him a more manicured and braided mane. For his body armor, I referenced some ancient armored mounts. He's got some big flat woven pieces hanging on either side of him to protect his guts. His neck and haunches are protected with some metal scale mail. To further match him to his rider, I threw in a bit more jewelry, piercing its ears and adding some rings to its tail, as well as some ties around its front feet. And with a touch of color, this should be enough for me to work with. This shot represents the first thing the Shipwright would hear, the pounding hooves of the Warthog approaching. Pretty straightforward. Another thing I'll be experimenting with on this project is visual representations of action. Since finishing Tellurian, I've kind of rediscovered Japanese comics. One Punch Man brought me back. I'm going to be attempting to use some of those techniques to communicate speed and movement. Eventually, I'll have to stop piling on unfamiliar techniques to learn. As with all the rest, it'll be bumpy at the start, but hopefully the later episodes will be better than the early ones. And that won't happen if I don't start now. This shot represents the next sound they'd hear, the clattering of armor and jewelry as the hunter races towards them. This drawing helped to assure me that the redesign was the way to go. He's introduced with athleticism, already standing on his saddle, ready for action. Another reason having model sheets is helpful is keeping track of scale. I placed the Warthog on his mount and used that to make sure he was the right size. As usual, I try to flip the drawing to check my anatomy. One day, when I'm a lot older, I might be able to flip the drawing and not see any problems. But I'm not there yet. For now, there's always something to fix. With the anatomy in place, it was time to start equipping his gear. As long as the bones and muscles are in their proper places, this is really just a long task of making sure each piece finds its home. While this plays out, if you're not already following me on Instagram or X, here's a pitch. At the time of this recording, I'm planning to start posting unused drawings from the project I was exploring before Dead Gods. It was going to be called Stridewick, and it had a lot of similar themes. Unlike this current project, with Stridewick I was working in secret, but I figured those drawings shouldn't just gather dust on the shelf, so you can follow along for weekly uploads of abandoned content. And finally, he leaps into action. This is the first full introduction to the character. This first stage is figuring out where all of his parts go, while trying to preserve as much of the energy from the thumbnail as possible. I know that once I've done the first pass, I can make any necessary adjustments after the flip. And of course, I immediately saw that one arm was too small, his humerus was too long, and I had to shorten his torso a bit. To keep track of all the layers, I color-coded them. This is particularly helpful later on, when several layers are overlapping. If I can tell that a small line is part of the body or the equipment, it helps me to render it correctly at the inking stage. Okay, as I finish off this drawing, based on the time this video is meant to release, my patrons will have seen the design for the armored Entelodon, as well as these 3 panels, last week. If you'd like early access to content as it's made, click the link in the description to sign up on Patreon. Also, Sabretooth and Dragon patrons get access to a small but growing private Discord server, where members have been sharing their own work and talking about art, storytelling, and creating independent projects. Sign up and join us if that sounds like fun. And with that, the final panel is complete. The Warthog gets his dramatic introduction. This means that page 1 of Hunting Ground is complete. Next week will be all about action, so stay tuned, and thanks for watching.